Good afternoon. I hope everybody's here to talk about working with large models. And the pictures you just saw were all, well, not all of them, a couple were real pictures, but they're all done in SketchUp. And my name is Mitchell Stengel, and I'm a mechanical engineer, and I do process design primarily. And I've been using SketchUp since version 2. And I myself try to do all my design work in SketchUp. I do use AutoCAD for making construction drawings, but I never give up with the model. I never depart from using it even till the end. We do our as-builts into the model. I often deliver the model to the client. I have got many clients to buy SketchUp and use it routinely. And that's actually been a nice adder because people send me preliminary models now. They're usually not very good, but they send them to me. And the other nice part is they review the models. But my whole point here today is to talk about working with large models. And I don't really want to spend I'm going to go through a few items up front about creating large models. But no matter how you create your model, you can always make it smaller. So I don't really want to focus on that today. I really want to talk about once you have a model and it's too big for you, you can talk to the people in the lab, you can talk to people who are doing Ruby scripts. There's 1,000 ways to make your model smaller. I'm going to go over a few items, but that's not my point. My point is, how do you deal with it once you have it? Once it's too big for you, how do you deal with it? So, large models. I want to just show you some pictures or that model right there, which there are a lot of pictures of. If I can read that number, it's 636,000 edges and 220,000 faces. You'll find in most modeling I do, there's not a lot of textures, but that model probably has, the layers don't show up, but there's probably 350 layers. This model is probably 40 megs and looks like 1.2 million edges, 400,000 faces. These are all reasonable to use models. This model is a little smaller, 100,000 faces. I work really hard at trying to keep the faces small by not using circles with 24 sides unless I really need to. I often send my employees back to the drawing board when they bring me models that are too large. This is a model done by Daniel Toll. It's, I don't know if I can read that number. What is it, 10 million edges and 3 million surface faces? I think this file is only 16 megs, or it's relatively small. I think the vegetation gives an incredible number of surfaces, but the file size is not that large. And the last one I got from Steve. It really doesn't do justice to it. This is a 142 meg file. It took my computer 6 minutes to open it up. Last time I did this lecture, I opened 8 models that were large. I was going to show people large models, and as soon as I got up and moved my cursor, the computer crashed. So when I walked in now, I closed Steve's model and my computer crashed. So it's mainly because I had so many other things open at the same time. But these are the type of models I'm talking about. You can easily get models that are 40 and 50 megabytes by putting complex textures in them, but they won't have the poly counts. And textures are actually really easy to work with. You just need to turn them off when you don't need to look at them, and then the models become easy to deal with. But these models will all not be easy to deal with, even the surfaces are on. So I'm just going to talk for a second about creating these things. You really need to work at minimizing the file size. The biggest thing about the file size I find, and anybody who wants to chime in is welcome to, I don't find the file size affects how working with the model is, but it really affects how long it takes to load the model. And I don't know how many people have been giving a presentation and they had their backup set at 5 minutes and they have a large model, and all of a sudden they go to move the model and the little hourglass comes on, or the Windows rainbow of death, and you just sit and wait. So making it smaller will make it load faster. It just makes all the file transactions easier. You really need to manage the number of polygons you have. And the basic example is circles. I see a lot of people will do handrails and they'll put 24-sided circles. It just makes a tremendous amount of complexity of the model and makes it much more difficult to render. It takes a lot longer to do it. You need to really isolate geometry in a large model for a lot of reasons. When you work with stuff, if you click on a surface, it's all interconnected, it's going to drive you crazy. And you just can't organize the model in the end. That's what I'm going to end up talking about in a few minutes if you don't isolate it. And you isolate it using groups and components. And number 4, you need to use components. I did a little test the other day just to prove it to myself, but I made 8 boxes, and then I made one box and called it box and made 8 of them and checked the file size. It wasn't an 1/8 of the size, but it was much smaller, maybe a 1/6 the size. So components will radically drop down the size of your model. And the other thing to remember, because we do this all the time at work, is large models are just a summation of small models. So we'll often take a component, save it out, and have somebody else go work on it, work on a different area of the project, and then pull it back in. You do have to be careful when you get really large models. Sometimes pulling components back into a model is painful or impossible. And my last point on this is you really need to think about how much detail you need to show. You don't always, you don't need to show, like in our work, we don't need to show every nut, bolt, and washer. That just adds so much complexity. These days, we're starting to get a lot of models back from vendors that are SolidWorks, our solid edge models, and we always take them back, convert them into SketchUp models, and we can import them, but they're often 100 megs, 10 megs, and I'll find every bolt hole has every thread on it. Every nut has every thread, and you get rid of that, and we get a 100K file. It's much easier to work with. But that's all I really want to say about creation, because you just need to talk to people. There's 1,000 ways to improve the models. I mean, every time I watch somebody work, I see some new trick that I didn't know I could do. So what I do want to talk about is organizing your model. And I've been told often that you shouldn't use layers. And coming from AutoCAD, I use layers all the time. All my models will have a ton of layers. And I really believe if you're going to use, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, sorry. If you're going to use large models, you need to use layers. But you need to think about how you want to organize the content and the visibility of your model. What do you want to look at and when? If you're looking on the outside of buildings and you've gone to the trouble to model furniture, you might want to have furniture on a layer you can turn off. So as you spin around your model, you're not trying to render the furniture, especially if you have transparencies on, because it'll look at every piece of furniture, and as you rotate around your model, you're going to see all that. And when you're outside the building, you don't need to see it. And just general organizational issues. I could write 100 questions like this. How are you going to work with it? What will your output be? I hope you're all going to take your SketchUp models and make construction drawings with them with layout or with AutoCAD. I hope none of you just do conceptual modeling. That's my hope. And again, for me, it's really important like we often work in big facilities. I'm not going to model the whole facility, but I'm going to model what's close to what I'm working on, what gives me the proper context so I can really design what I need to. And people, I think modeling is really fun. And it's really great to just model a whole facility, but you get all done with it, and then I'm working on some little tiny piece, and I made a huge file that has no doesn't help me with my work. Sorry. So the big part of this is you need to make a plan, you need to understand your plan, you need to think about it. Just a note on planning, I think sometimes when I make plans, the plans get in the way of being creative or solving the problem. So you need to figure out for yourself when you do that. Some people want to do it from the first moment they start planning. Some people want to import all their layers into their templates. Whenever you want to do it, or however it works for you, but at some point you're going to have to organize your model. Ooch, sorry. Let me make this larger. Okay, I want to talk about creating visibility controls, and these are all elements in SketchUp which if you use it for more than a few months, you should understand are there. And I'm going to talk about layers, I'm going to talk about using sections, I'm talking about hiding geometry, scenes, the outliner. These are all basic parts of SketchUp. There's no silver bullet in any of this, but you've got to use these things to isolate geometry and to organize it so you can essentially turn the geometry off when you don't need to see it. Don't look at things you don't need to look at when you're working your models. And if you make a big model and it's all on layer 0, you've not grouped or made components of anything, you'll never be able to do that. I mean, you can hide to your heart's content, but you won't get down to what you want. You probably won't be able to find it. You won't be able to move through it. So you need to use layers. And I'm gonna use a little simple example several times here. Make this large. Ouch, I don't want to do that. Cancel. Excuse me. As I said, right before you guys walked in, my computer crashed. Our SketchUp crashed. Layers. The important thing about using layers is layer 0 is a very special layer. My recommendation to everybody is you should model on layer 0. You should group at whatever level you think is important things into groups or components, and then you should put those on named layers. And named layers that you understand the names of and you can sort through and find. My models sometimes have 400 layers and they're very organized. We often organize them by process. All our structural elements will have an S in the front because I get tired of looking for girts and purlins and beams and columns and all sorts of different places. I want them all together because I like to go through them and highlight them and turn them all off at once. It's just trying to be organized. Layer 0 is unique because all the geometry on these are all components now. If I turn layer 0, excuse me, I make layer 3 the primary layer. I turn off layer 0, nothing disappears. All the geometry in this model is on layer 0. Only the components are on other layers. It's the only layer that acts like that. It's the only layer that takes on properties of the layers it's put into. And that's the same as AutoCAD, if you've used AutoCAD. How many people here do use AutoCAD? Okay. The only thing, I hear a lot from people that layers in SketchUp are a lot different. I don't think they're a lot different. The only difference is you can't lock layers. But the visibility controls are the same. If you turn it off, it's not there. Actually, it's kind of like locking a layer. It's not there unless the geometry's connected. So, before I go much further, do people feel comfortable with layers? Yes, I see a lot. Does anybody not feel comfortable with layers? A couple of people. I'm just going to spend a minute more on this. There's one thing people have asked for a lot. I hear people ask for is nesting layers. There's a trick in CAD where I can go through and I can turn off layer 1 and the 1 disappears, the 2 disappears, the 3 disappears. I can turn them all back on. I can turn all the numbers off by turning off this layer 0 number. I can turn all the letters off by 0 alpha. I've done that because if I go into this component, this is on layer 3, layer 2, layer 1. What I did was group them all together. Actually, I made them a component in this case. And then I put that on a layer called 0 numbers. So I've essentially nested the layers. So if your jobs, you have 15 wall types, You can have those walls, big sections of walls, in a group on a layer, and then put all the walls onto a greater layer called zero walls. I only put the zero in front because I like those grouped. Those greater layers are the nest holders to be high up on my list, because I don't like filtering through and trying to turn things off deep down into the model. This is a huge piece, and once you get the knack of it, it really will simplify how you use large models, because you can turn off everything but what you want to work on. You can flip it on and off. I think I've covered all those little elements. Sections. Sections are great things. Yep.
Maybe you go into that later, but like, what is the advantage of the layers that you're advocating versus using like groups or components and like organizing and outline?
I'm saying you use both. He's asked me why you would use layers instead of just using groups and components. Right now, where SketchUp is, this current release, you have to be really fastidious about naming components and groups to use the outliner. And you can do it. And there's a book called Building Simple and Building Green by Dennis, I think he says his last name, Fakai. Dennis uses the outliner almost primarily to do his stuff. And you'll find his models are really large, and they'll have 20 layers at most. So it's possible, but you have to really be, every time you create a group or a component, you have to name it in a way. And I'm just looking at, like, I went through my hard drive and got all these pictures out that I rotated before, and I said, you know, I really should write SU before every time I print out a picture like that to send a client. And by the way, all those were pictures that I sent to client for progress reports, or people had questions. Contractors want to know what they're going to get. But I have experimented myself using outliner. I'm going to get to it in a minute. And it's possible, but I think at this point it's still a little difficult. If you're anal enough to name everything consistently, then it's very possible. What you need to think about when you're doing these models, this is a large model. We'll wait. As the rest of the model comes in place. Sections are incredibly helpful because I can eliminate a ton of geometry whenever I want to look at stuff. So I set up sections all the time that will allow me to filter out information I don't want to see. And sections are kind of I guess the right word, it's kind of a dirty way of making the model smaller, because it's not really organizationally. You could have a big model all in one layer and use sections. But you shouldn't forget about them because they're really good. The other thing I'm doing, if you've noticed, is my scenes across the top, all those ones with S's on them are sections. So I can go through my model and go back to that section whenever I want to, and all I'm saving on that tab is a section. So I tend to go through a model and set up sections up front. And while I'm here, same thing with layers. Because I've layered this model heavily, actually I shouldn't say that. This model I don't think has that many layers. Let's see. I don't know. A couple hundred. So I mean, I don't think this is that bad. You may think differently. What you'll find on the scenes is, as if you move through these things, I got this list of all these L layers. I'm going to turn off. I'm backtracking, so I apologize.
Next question.
Yeah.
When you're working on these really complex models, do you have a fear of losing the model at any given point? What's your attitude about saving extra copies of the model or progress copies, or just flat out saving it?
I have the same fear, and I tell my wife this all the time as she raises a Word document. It's always quicker to do it the second time. So yeah, you need to save often. You need to be careful. The bigger problem in modeling, I don't care whether it's AutoCAD or SketchUp, you need to lock geometry you're not using. And it's a feature that many people don't use because I've done all sorts of, I was working on a project in 2000 and we were doing it in AutoCAD in Germany, and we had broken the plant down into 13 areas, and we had 13 central models, and we were progressed up to about the 5th area in detail, and someone had moved 3 of the other areas in the background. It's like we didn't understand about locking layers yet. And we went back to regenerate the drawings because there was some small change, and the drawings were obliterated. Of course, it was right before I was about to head out to Germany, and I flipped out. But looking at the model, you could see that things were just scattered. And so we just moved them back into, went back, got an older model, put all that stuff in. So these models, the same thing. You need to lock geometry you're not using. You can't lock layers, but you can grab groups and components and lock them. Yes? Well, it's an alphabetical listing, so you're going to use those any way you want to. I'm sure if you're an architect, you're going to use 1 as for architectural elements, and the mechanical will be like 28. But, you know, that's, you know, I put the architecturals at the bottom, double Z or something. Yeah, right. No way. Yeah.
So, the problem I run into is I use layers a lot to organize my model. But if I have a number of scenes going and I think, oh, I need a new layer for something, insert that layer, and that layer populates every one of your scenes.
Yeah, the Ruby people, Todd and them have there's a script out that will allow you to bring in is a hidden layer? Yeah, there's a script out there that will, hidden layer. It's a great script because you can bring it in and you don't populate. That's the same problem in AutoCAD. It's the exact same problem. When you go to do drawings, you put a new layer into something you're extracting into a set of drawings, and you got to go through and take it out on every layer. So, yeah.
The other thing I noticed is getting components from other folks because all of a sudden you start populating unknown layers.
Yeah, that's true. But SketchUp's really good about changing layers. It's really great about deleting layers because unlike other programs, when you delete a layer, you don't have to, you can really delete the geometry on it, or you can convert it all back to 0 or to any other layer. Everybody understands that concept? I see. Anybody not understand that? Because I'll show that later. I have to mess up my simple example to do it. So I'm jumping forward to the scenes. I'll come back to sections in a minute. But so what I'm doing in this model, and I'm going to kill these dialog box. Yep.
Up there you have section 385. How do you keep track of all that? Do you have a list of the sections?
Well, it makes its own list, right? This is, if you have a Mac, you have a superior interface, and you get this little list here. There are other problems with it I don't like, but it did crash, but my PC would have crashed too. So, I mean, you can change the order of these. You know, this Corey scene, I don't even know what it is. It's one of my employees saved a scene he wanted.
Well, no, what it meant was if you want to go to a certain section, how do you know what number that is?
I don't know. I don't. The 385 has to do in this model with elevation 385.
Oh, okay. So you
Okay.
have a convention.
We have a convention, and it changes every job, or I'd like to say it evolves every job, and I think it's getting better every job. But I can pull up models in here, and I go, how do I go through this? I really don't know where I'm at. I don't, you know, I got to play with the model a little bit to understand it. The beauty of modeling is there's something to play with, unlike line work, where you just got to get out the whole drawing set and look at it. We will wait. Okay, back here for a second. Just to go a little bit on and on about scenes. I have all layers. Of course, I cheat though, because it's not really all layers. Because if I turn all layers on here, I have a site plan that I think is 100 acres. Oops, turn. So yeah, no demo. Oh, I took it out of this model, good. You won't have to endure me turning that on then. Using these, the concept is using the scenes as layer sets. So if you use these, it's a really powerful tool. I'm sorry. This is the problem with large models. You got to practice when you do demos to clients. Yep.
Each time you create new geometry, you must be on that layer that's going to go on.
No. You model on layer 0. Well, usually a model gets this big, you don't do any modeling in it unless I'm doing some connective tissue, in the model. I usually model it outside and bring it in, insert it.
Only components or groups are.
Yeah, and if I'm doing lines, I often don't use the dimension tool because I find it too hard to get rectilinear dimensions. It's much easier to take a line tool and pick a point and pick another. And we often leave those in the model accidentally. And so we do model, and often if you do modeling in the larger context, you'll group that out and then put it on a layer it needs to go. But you do all that, you do the modeling on layer 0. Yep.
You said lock groups. Like, how should you go about locking?
You asked how to do it?
Yeah, is that an outliner?
No. Well, yeah, it is. But it's other places too. I'm going to have to move forward in a minute here. Let's do this. So all the red things are locked. You can pick geometry and then right click on it and it'll say lock or unlock. When I unlock it, it turns yellow. It's pretty straightforward. You can also unlock it in the outliner. The outliner is really good for doing stuff like that. Okay, so I'm just going to go through this a little bit. So if I click on these layers and my computer performs, I actually shouldn't do too much of this in this model because we'll be here for a while. So this was a demo. This is what I'm demoing out of this process plant. And there's a layer for all the new stuff. So you get the basic idea. When I'm moving in this model, with this shown, it's really simple. There's no problem. I can go through it. I don't lose integrity of the model. I got really good visibility. I can work here. I could do what you said before. I could model here, group it, put it on a layer. I just got to be aware of what I'm doing.
And how do you identify any collisions between components?
I look.
Just look.
Yeah, I mean, it looks stupid. You were there yesterday. I flew the airplane into the house. I mean, pretty evident. I mean, there's little stuff is hard. You have to check carefully. I want to just talk about the hide tool, and I'm going to kind of go into the outliner. Or do people understand the power of sections? I'll show you just a little example. Okay, so these sections, I have this section which is on the 1.4 is on column line 1.4. So if I put that section on, this is a part of the Mac I don't understand yet. So that turns that section on. If I go on these higher sections, I'm clipping this model. So they work no matter what my context of layers is, no matter how much what I have visible on. The other thing I hope you notice is I've turned off the 142 meg model I opened had transitions turned on. I almost always turn that off because it's a real problem. I never use shadows unless I'm going to take a picture. Like somebody asked me what the shadows of a building do. I get it all set up because when you turn on shadows on a model like this, you're just going to wait for a long time.
Where's that transitions?
Where is it transition?
Where
I
do
don't.
you turn it on and off?
I never turn it on unless I absolutely have to. Unless the client begs me to tell them what the solar shadow is going to do. It's just painful. I mean, if you're working with big architectural models, like you're doing big scenes of, you need to sit down, turn on the shadows, look at it. I just recommend not panning and moving around a lot. I mean, you can set up scenes and do movies and do all that, but working generally, you're just going to slow yourself down to nothing.
Yeah, but which drop down has transitions? It's under model info?
It's either under view, settings, and you just unenable your scene transitions. Hiding geometry is just a really powerful thing to do. Back to the model for a minute. And this is where locking becomes a problem. We'll go back to this whole model. I'm going to see if I have a section. Another little tip on sections is just put a section up high above your model and flip to that. It's a lot less trouble than turning the section cuts off all the time. Because you'll think you've gone to a section tab and you'll think it's not working. And it's just because you turned off the section toggle. So if I come in here and select all my geometry, I hit hide, anything that's not locked goes away. Hiding is a really good tool. You're working and you got a lot of stuff in your way, especially if you're doing something. I'm always putting 100 pounds of stuff in a 1 pound bag. So everything around me is always existing. And if that's all grouped in a way that I can just touch it and hide it, it all goes away. And it's a really simple concept, but if you use it effectively, it can make your modeling go really quick. The display, the display will work quite rapidly with everything hidden. The only problem with locking now is I can't hide locked geometry. I can turn off the layers it's on and hide it that way, or change the visibility of it that way. So that's a downside of locking. Ouch. I'm going to go back to that for a second. See if I can re-hide all the stuff. It's going to do it. This stuff is, all the things I'm talking about are really just, I call them techniques. And the more you use them, they start to become skill sets for dealing with these models. Because you can get incredibly frustrated because it can be so slow going. But the concept is always, why do I have to look at all these other things? And have I organized it so I can turn them off quickly? Or just turn on the things I want to look at? And the more I thought about giving this presentation, the more I realized it is really the essence of how to deal with these large models. Okay, Outliner. Outliner is I think it's a really good tool. You can find any named group or component in your model easily and zoom to it. I'll show you that in a second. You can change the visibility on any group or layer. You can hide it. You can't change the layer. But you can hide it or you can unlock it. You can figure out where some element is within your model. If you put it in the wrong thing, you put a new element into a demo layer, a demo group. And it's a very powerful tool in that way. You can, like I said, you can determine and you can change. If you use instance names carefully, as this young man asked me a minute ago, you can absolutely use it instead of doing layers. But it takes a lot of discipline to do that. So I'm going to go back to my 1, 2, 3 example here. Sorry. And bring up outliner. How many people here have not played with outliner? Okay. Most of you. Okay, so the basic interface is this. You can collapse all, and you can expand all. And what this will show you is any group or component. And I made everything a component here. If I make one of these a group, which I could do, I can do it from here actually. I can right click on an element in the outliner. I can get most of the context menus, plus I can get some other things. Like I can zoom to the extents of this component. So if you're in a huge model and you're trying to find something that you named and you remember what it is, but no one else does, this is a great tool. I can, well, I can go over all these, but it's good to go through and read and play with, is what I would say. I also have some Ruby scripts in here, obviously. But let me get out of this for a second. Where the power starts to become is, let me just explode these components. Okay, so now I have these 6 components. Let's say I just want to find the numbers, and I was very disciplined about how I named all these components you see on the screen here. So if this works right, or I typed it right, I'll be very disappointed if this doesn't work on the Mac. Where's the SketchUp people? What should happen is they should just, it should highlight.
It's just like putting something in the search line.
Is it? No, okay, I don't know what's going on. I'm going to test this in another way. So I'm going to flip to one of these larger models. I am a Mac user for the last month and a half.
You use AutoCAD too, right?
I've used AutoCAD since version 2.6.
But you can't use it on the Mac, right?
Excuse me?
It's not on the Mac, is it?
It's on the Windows side of my Mac.
Oh, okay. So you use virtual software.
If I come in here and type, oh my God,
I wonder if it only works on sort by name.
I don't know. Okay, I hope everybody's underwhelmed by this. Oh, sort by name. Expand all.
Can you hit return?
I did. Enter.
And maybe just do the file size.
No,
Try
I've used this on the Windows. So I'm going to explain how this is supposed to work because I'm failing miserably here. If you have PCs, I know it works this way. If you type in a text stream, and that text stream is in the instance name or in the component definition name, it will pull it'll just show those elements. Everything else gets hidden in the list. It'll show contextual parents, but they come in a different color. So it's a really easy way to grab a lot of geometry. And I apologize because this should work. And I don't really understand why. I will be asking after this session though. I'm going to go back up and reverse this a little bit to rename these because I want to show you a couple other elements of my broken outliner. So let's say I didn't group these things the way I wanted to, but I have the letters and numbers placed right where I want them. I can grab my B here and just drag it into this other component. You know, you see it's dimmed out now. It's because it's part of the other component at this point. So now it's in here. So that's a really powerful thing for me because often we model stuff that's not in the right place, and you can just simply open up the model, and if the filter thing works, you name things similarly, and you get a very small list, and you can just drag one component into another and reorganize it. So if I want the 3, and notice how it highlights over here when I click it in the model. I can put this up here, and all I'm doing is playing games really, but I named the 1 A. So all I've done is reorganize these components. And while I'm here, I want to talk about another little concept. When you're modeling and you go into a component, one of the really neat things about this is I can hide the rest of the geometry of the model. So I don't have to deal with it. And it's another way to hide geometry when you're trying to limit things. So if you group, sometimes when I'm working on models and I pick 4 or 5 things I want to work on, I'll just group them right there and then edit them and hide the rest of the model so I don't have to look at anything else, and all the other context goes away from around me. I create my own little universe locally. So I'm going to go back out. SketchUp person. Hey Peter, how come Outliner doesn't work on a Mac? I'll ask later. Okay, so I'm going to move through this. So basic concepts or skills. Again, the important thing on all this is trying to only display model elements that you want to work with at the time or you need to show or whatever you're doing at that moment. Understanding how you can change the visibility of any group or component by hiding it or putting it on a layer. Being able to move through the model to a particular point. Actually, I want to demonstrate that in a minute. I'm going to go over some tips and stuff in a second. Being able to zoom, orbit, and pan with your mouse. Everybody understands that you can do that with a mouse? Anybody understand that you can, anybody not understand how to orbit with a mouse? Well, that's good. I have seen people that don't know how to do it. Parallel and perspective toggles. This is a huge deal, I believe. If you don't, how many people here do not use shortcuts? Oh, 1. You should use shortcuts. You should get rid of your icons. I have a few, but that's because I'm in transition. I have a split personality, and I haven't put assigned stuff for that yet. But if you're in a model and you can go through and shortcut your model and shortcut your ability to view parallel or perspective and flip through it by knowing where all the keys are, and you don't have to go up to the menu, saves you a ton of time. Oop. Wrong. There's ones that come in with the computer. Most people who are use AutoCAD a lot, like me, try to make all your shortcuts like AutoCAD keys because it's just easier. I only have to remember one set of commands. At least that's what I think I did. So parallel and perspective. It's amazing how much simpler the model looks. Well, this looks simpler to me. And you're able to find things. And being able to flip back and forth between the two is incredibly important when you're dealing with large models. Again, it's a simple concept, but it's really important. So I'm going to say this over and over. All these things are just skills in how to control the visibility of the model and how to navigate through the model. So, and I think it becomes way more enjoyable and you get more productive once you understand how to use them, and also once you put shortcuts on your computer to use them. But I'm preaching to the choir, obviously. Tips and tricks, use shortcuts. Before you open a large model, make sure you go through and change your dialog boxes, change the component to list view, close the outliner, close the layer box, close the component dialog, because all those things populate when you open the model up. So you're going to sit there and wait every time. One of the things that's happening when I was switching models that I had the outliner open, so it's regenerating the outliner when it comes up. Turn off shadows. Some of these things are out of order. I'm going to say assign a shortcut for the hide dialog switch. You need to assign shortcuts to everything. Make sure, as we talked about before, that you lock geometry that's you're not going to be working with. Styles. I really like to have a style that tells me if I'm modeling orthographically. And I saw Aiden show this earlier in the day. There's a lot of red, blue, and green in this model because things go on the red, blue, and green axis. And it's a really major deal once you figure this out and you notice that a lot of stuff's black and you thought it was vertical. I mean, you thought it was on one of the axes. It makes modeling a lot simpler. Use the camera tool. Are people familiar with the camera tool? No? Camera tool. Brings up this little guy right here. So if I stand up here on this and look down at this little platform, I just went there. It's an incredible way to move through a model once you know where you're at. I mean, if you want to look at a particular item, it's incredibly helpful. If I can get an inference. See, I can't get an inference on this face because this wall is transparent. There's another trick. I'm just going to hit F2. I'm going to wait because I'm showing too much stuff right now. I actually know better than to try to do this.
Just trying to make a point.
Yeah, I am, but while it's thinking, we'll go back to the list. If it'll let me. I watch other people doing this as they present. The two best zoom commands other than your mouse wheel are zoom extents and zoom to windows. Because when you get lost within a model, the best thing you can do is zoom out to the extent of it and then go back into a window. And set those up as some easy to get to speed key, shortcut, because that's a common problem in large models, is you get lost within the model, you don't know where you're at, you need to get out of it. Also, as I was trying to demonstrate a minute ago, we'll see if we're done with that. Going to wireframe will give you that old AutoCAD feeling, and also it makes it much easier to move through your model. And I think my model's still thinking about coming up. No. Sorry. See if we can get it to come up. Yep, there it is, wireframed. So your display, because you're not rendering anything in wireframe, is really quick. I don't know how many times I personally got myself stuck with inside of a vessel or a wall or an I-beam, and going to wireframe allows you to go in and out of it. What I should do is demonstrate what I'm saying too, because what I should do is turn off some layers here. So I told you guys before, this one was done a long time ago, so I don't remember all the shoot, so yeah, do that. Yeah. So what I did is hide all the structural elements of this building. So I don't know how many people have done this. You're within something, you can't get out. If you flip to wireframe, Or if you flip to X-ray, you can get out of it. Get yourself out and make sure you're out. Then turn your model back on, or turn on all the surfaces. Just a couple of other things. If panning's too slow, you're deep in a model, you can zoom out from one point and zoom back to another. It's much simpler and quicker. You should just try it. It's a very helpful thing. If you touch off an infinity, you zoom in and out relative to infinity too, instead of right where you're at. Double clicking your middle mouse button helps you center your model so you orbit about whatever you double clicked on. Holding down the control key. Have you ever tried to move a model and you want to rotate the whole model over and tilt it over? If you hold down the control key on the PC and the alt key on the Mac, that allows you to tilt your whole model, and it kind of like turns gravity off. So there's a gravity element. Yeah. Yeah. It centers the display on whatever you click on. And the other thing it does, and that changes the point of orbit to the center of wherever you clicked. So naturally it'll pick a point in the middle of the display. It's often 0, 0, 0, but if you click someplace outside, it'll recenter the display, and then you rotate about that point.
Same with AutoCAD does.
It does? I didn't know that. He said AutoCAD does the same thing.
Can you demo that?
I'm leery of demoing things at this point.
Maybe in a smaller model?
Yeah, maybe. I'll try this one first. So I'm here, I'm rotating, I don't know, somewhere about, I'd say about that point. So if I come over here and double click this, it'll start going about that point. I guess I'll try to do something off. The mighty mouse, unfortunately, the wheel tends to move when you double click the middle button. See, it moved it all over, the display over. So it moved it over to that point right there is what I was trying to point at. I'll try to go to this point now. Double click the center button. I went and checked most of these things I'm talking about exist in the help, but often they're like just one-liners. And so none of us read help. So until somebody shows you, you don't get it. I'm going to try to show this. I tried to demo somebody asked me about demoing so if I try to rotate this model over, it's like it's connected to the earth and gravity. If I hold down the alt key, I can tilt it. And I usually find this helpful if somebody's asked me to model a house for them and they give me 4 plans and I bring them into a SketchUp model and I'm trying to do a component on each face and rotate around them, and I'm trying to rotate this huge piece of stuff and it won't turn. I can never get onto the side of it. Or a big plan like this, if I want to go around something, I can't do it. Face hints. Using X-rays, wireframe, I talked about before. I'm going to demonstrate this hiding rest of the model. And again, in the help menu, there's instructions how to use the move tool with absolute and relative addressing. And most people don't realize they can do that in SketchUp. So if I'm going to have to unlock things here. So if I come into this piece, every other part of the model goes away. So if I zoom extents, I'm there. Or I can go back and turn on the rest of the model. Or I'm going to wait as the rest of the model comes on. There it goes. So if I want to change a component and I want the context of the rest of the model, I'm going to have this on. But if I don't want it, you really should turn it off because it saves a lot of time. except today. I try to write up these hints, tips and hints. I try to write up stuff that I thought was important. There's a ton more. If anybody's interested in this absolute relative address, I can show you, but it's a little, I'll say esoteric, but just like AutoCAD, you can move things or you can do a line to a certain point in space. So I'm about done at this point, but people have questions?
When I use the zoom window command,
Yeah.
it doesn't always give me what I'm zooming.
Yeah, zoom window will go to the context of whatever it perceives you're trying to go to.
Okay.
So again, if you try to use wireframe and limit it, but it's, SketchUp is, the real power for me of SketchUp is all the inferences, but those inferences really kill you when you're zooming in, because it's doing the same thing. It's going, what of these 1,000 points that you just put your window over do you really want to go to?
So is there
Again, you hide stuff you don't want to, you try to get down to that one piece, either by having it named through the component thing, turning layers off. Going to wireframe helps a lot. You'll get down to it quicker. If you highlight it before you zoom it, like select it and then zoom. If it's a component, you can do it and then zoom to it and then turn everything else back on. Whoever.
Can you talk about how multiple users can work on a model like this?
Yeah, sure. The question is how multiple users work on a model. So if I want somebody to work on, I'm going to go and see. Let's see. Yep, that's all good. So I pick this tank. This tank's a component. I just go save as, and I save it out. You go work on it, and then you just have to reload it. The only point to components like this, where they come into 0, 0, 0 in their own little model, or the component access, shouldn't ever be changed, because it will come in a different place back into your model. So, it, yeah, same thing. You can change it, but then you got to remember that.
So if you do that, and take that component out to another file,
Yeah.
if you just copy and paste and put paste in place, it'll actually paste it to where it should be in the model when you bring it back, if you paste it back.
What was it? What was the first part of that?
Okay, so you're going to do what you're doing there. It's not a component of the model. If you copy, open a new file, paste it in place in the new file, someone works on it, when they're finished, if they copy it and paste it in place, it'll go exactly back into the old file. It saves a lot of trying to re-reference where that piece was.
It is, but my history with also using AutoCAD and X references, it's much easier to save it out, and it will always come back where it should be. And that's way more reliable than, yeah, it's way more. His question was if you do paste in place with, it's called with I've never used it, I've seen it, but I've never done it. It's with reference or with location?
It's just paste in place.
Oh yeah, in place. That will work too, but I wouldn't do that, but yeah. Excuse me? I did my handout late, but they'll post it on the web. Yep.
Is 0, 0, 0 inherent in the component when you save it out?
I will change to a smaller model. 0, 0, 0 is inherent in everything you draw, and it's relative to the component. And I don't know, I don't think it's arbitrary to the component, but it's not always obvious how it's set up. We go through a lot of effort to make sure we know where it's at. Like on these tanks, it'll always be in the center of the tank.
You're just doing a component reload.
Yep. This looks bad, but it's actually a preliminary design document. So the level of detail in this model is fairly low except for the topology of the mine. So if I go to, not model, yeah, model info. Yeah, model info, and I go to components. I have show component access is on. Is that different on the Mac? Does it, the component access, don't they just show up if you have that clicked?
I think that's just when you edit component and toggle whether or not it's
You have to show a component.
So, but on Windows, it shows them all the time, right? Well, I think it's just buried down. Yeah, it's hidden by the floor below. But the answer to your question is, whoever asked about the component access, they're not inherent, and you need to set them up and be aware of where they're at up here.
You have a lot of sections that are visible and large enough. Give one example of creating a section to make it hidden between
You said I have a lot of what?
sections
Yeah.
that are live and they're off, they're not visible and not active. Can you show how you make a section and then make it not visible but still active?
Yeah, I can show it. I will. I'm going to even get a simpler model of this. But the deal with the sections is all I'm doing is setting up a scene and saving that scene with one section on.
So that it's checked to save the section.
Yeah. So, and all I'm saving in that scene is sections. Okay? So if I got 20 sections, I'll create 20 scenes that have one section dedicated to each one, just so I can go back to them.
So each scene only has that one section.
Yeah. And we tend not to bury sections within components because they never turn on when you want to. It's a really neat trick to be able to do that. And if you're doing you're doing some type of presentation and we have a component within a component and you have sections in all of them. It's a really neat trick to do that, but it's not reliable, or it never works when you want it to. Or it always works when you don't want it to. Yeah?
In your file organization, how do you track old versions that you may want to show before and after change, revisions and things? Do you do it as part of the layers or part of scenes, or do you just use separate models?
Yes, all that. I mean, if it's a small amount of content, we'll keep options. You know, often when we're starting a project, I can have projects that have 10 options, and if I can hold them in the file and it doesn't get too big, I'll put a layer grouping for all of them. And that I use Outliner a lot. I don't know why Outliner on the Mac doesn't work the same, but huh? Okay, good. But yeah, I'll keep option 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a layer. Yeah. Yeah.
How do you take a large model like this and actually use it as a design document or planning or
Okay, I think I heard most of that. You said how I take a large model like this and make design documents out of it?
Yeah.
I did that yesterday. What I do is I use AutoCAD, and I export AutoCAD to 3D, and I use commands that have been in AutoCAD, I think at least since version 10, which is dview, and now there's a command called 3D clip, and we section the model that way and use viewports. So.
Does AutoCAD recognize the scenes you have set up?
No.
Because I noticed
Does
sometimes
it?
when I bring a plan in from AutoCAD.
I think it does. It saves them as views, but I think views are virtually worthless in AutoCAD. I mean, I'm never going to make them work. What it doesn't save is the layer states. It'll save where the camera was, so it comes up as a camera location, but that doesn't help you much. What you really want is all the layer states and what you have hidden and not hidden.
Is there any way to copy scenes between projects?
There's a Ruby script.
So you can do that.
Yeah, you can. There's Ruby scripts to do that. Does it takes the layer state and it takes where the camera's at, essentially, I think.
Yeah, I think
So
so.
if you're using all different layers, it's kind of meaningless, I think. And if your model doesn't exist in the same XYZ coordinates.
Because what I do is I'll do a lot of animations, and then, I don't need those scenes for whatever I'm working on, but as my project's evolving, if I can go back and use those scenes again,
Yeah.
already set up.
Yeah. Any other questions?
You said you want to be able to hide block geometry?
Yeah. You got a Ruby script for that?
Next week.
Yeah, good. That'd actually be excellent.
I noticed sometimes in the layering thing, so it sometimes you have objects, you know they're hidden in the layer, but you're not sure which layer.
Show hidden. Yeah, so you guys
So
do,
you show hidden, but the layer itself is turned off, it's not going to show.
right.
Do you know of any utility that can select stuff by?
I make a tab that says show all layers. I mean, I just turn all the layers on, flip back and forth.
It can get off your power.
Yeah, it does.
Along the lines of that component block, do you ever do really complex ones or make a dummy of it? Say it has a component as complex and then a component as simple. While you're working in the model, have the simple one work on that component.
Yes. The question was, do I ever make a simplified version of something and a complex version and offload and reload? And I often do that. Usually for presentation for clients because they want to see a level of detail that's not necessary to do my work. Okay, thanks a lot.